So, today I wanted to talk about virtue and about duty. The two key things in, a lot of parts of Taoist and Confucian, so Chinese philosophy. So, what we're going to do is we're going to plop down a little drawing, a little diagram thing. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I did this recently on a lecture and it worked like a charm, so we're doing this again. Guys, meet the means virtue. Okay, so it's just a Chinese word meaning virtue. That's all it is, right? And actually, virtue splits between Confucianism. I wrote it wrong. Whoopsie daisy. We get one more shot because I have 2 sheets of paper. Yeah, so we have, like I was saying, we have virtue. And then we have Confucianism. I swear to God, my teacher would cry if she saw my writing. Alright. So as I was saying, we got virtue, we got Confucianism, and we got Taoism, right? So Confucianism and Taoism, these two big philosophies from China that have been just battling over the last, couple fucking thousand years of their history for influence over China, and and we're gonna split them very, very neatly into the yin and yang, where we're gonna have the yang Confucianism, the yin Taoism. If you don't know what the yin yang is, then it's like something that we're gonna get to. There's plenty of these lectures. So there's the two terms that I define. The first one is virtue, right? So the that we have in the middle, and righteousness or duty, because they get sometimes cross-translated, but I want to redefine the term duty. Because your duty as a human being, you have one mission, right? And your mission is to obey by virtue. That's your duty, right? Just take the virtue, find your virtue, obey by your virtue. So then we're going to get to righteousness, which is the other big character that we have even in the title of the stream, right? And it's actually, a part of virtue, right? So we have it on it's mirrored for me, on the Confucianism side, and then we have the little virtue that, it stems from, righteousness that stems from virtue, right? All right, let's keep on defining it. So first, we'll dive into the more shallow part of today's lecture, the one that we're not going to actually focus on nearly as much, which is the Confucian philosophy, right? So Confucian righteousness splits into 3 main categories. There's, I think, a few more, but for the purpose of today, we're not going deep in detail over this. All you really need to know is that there is, and 3 things it splits into. So the first one of these 3 is ritual, right? And this is like ceremony and your proper social conduct in the modern world. What we would call this is mannerism and knowing how to behave in the outside world, right? Another one, and this one is difficult to define in short, but another one, this one is benevolence, right? So this is being good. And actually benevolence and virtue are really similar to each other in many ways, but benevolence is strictly Confucian, right? So if you honor your yi, wrong term. If you honor your yi, then benevolence kind of gets done on its own, because benevolence is being a benevolent human being. It's the like what you ought to do. Like you ought to, according to Confucius, you ought to study. You ought to conduct yourself. You ought to, go through the proprietary and rituals, and you ought to, maintain your familial relationships, right? And speaking of familial relationships, the last part of this right here is 孝, which is the familial relationships, right? They define 5 social relationships. It's sovereign subject, so king and the the people he rules over, father son, older sibling, younger sibling, master apprentice, and husband wife. So that's the 5 relationships that are in society according to the Confucianists. And 孝 is making sure that you behave properly in those social situations, right? But let's get now to Taoism, which is the core and the essence of what we actually are going to be talking about today. Right on this side of Taoism, we have virtue, right? And to honor your virtue, you ought to follow your own Tao. So what is your own Tao? Tao could be literally translated as way, right? So your own way, like the way of you. What do you do, right? Like, not like literally the way, the road, although that's also a meaning of the word Tao. But what we're talking about is your own way. And following your own way is the very topic that we want to talk about today. This is like the meat and bones of what we're going to be getting to today, right? So let's split the Tao into 2 little things. And it's your own li. Your own li. And li is like a mini version of Tao. So if you take the universe, because the Tao is like the governing principle that governs the entirety of the universe, right? Everything is within the Tao because it's like the Greek logos, or like the Greek logos. It's like just the governing principle and mechanism that governs all of reality. And then like a subset of it is the li. So the universe has a whole Tao and people have their own Tao, but the people's Tao is actually called li, right? So the little internal mini Tao of you. This is like your thing. It's like your law, like, right? The thing that governs you. And everything has a single Tao. Because the Tao governs all things. If it were a mathematical equation, it would be like the world's longest equation that explains everything. Everything. Right? The theory, everything. Like this theorem in physics that they were trying to come up with. They're literally trying to find the Tao number. And li is like a more local Tao. So it's like your own little Tao, your own little thing, right? What you are supposed to be as a human being, right? Everybody has their own li, and it's your job to find it in your lifetime. And how do you find it? Great that you ask, because this is the next thing that we're going to be talking about. Wrong stroke order. Whoopsies. You're going to have to excuse the poor handwriting, because it's absolutely atrocious, but whatever. And we have the Wu Wei, which means effortless action. This is how you find your Tao, really, because like you find your Tao by finding your Wu Wei. So it's like, we could literally make like a connection like this, right? Like it all comes down to Wu Wei. It's find the one thing in the world that feels like play to you but looks like work to others, right? If we want to get like Naval Ravikant, like this little Naval Ravikantism. And this is what I want to talk to you about, because your Wu Wei and your Li end up powering this one very important thing that we have, which is your work, your mission, your purpose, your reason to wake up every single day, your reason to keep going, your reason to do literally anything in the entire world, right? We do things for our own sense of mission.
Hey, you watched this far, meaning you like this thing, so come watch live every Wednesday and Saturday at 6:30 p.m. European time, and I hope to see you there. Thanks.